I was technically family, but for 15 years, I didn't exist on paper. No birthday card. No Mother's Day text. Not even a wrong number call. Then his emergency contact form suddenly had my name on it. Why now? Before I share what happened next, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. He called me Patricia. Not Mom. Not Trish. Not anything warm or personal. Just Patricia. When I married his father, Ben was 13 and already deep in loyalty to his mother. I didn't try to compete. I didn't bribe, beg, or force a bond. I made snacks, drove carpools, clapped at recitals. He barely looked at me. For 15 years, I was the woman who washed the towels he never thanked me for. It hurt, but quietly. I buried the pain in busy work. I ran a dog grooming side, hustled out of the garage, and volunteered at the shelter on weekends. My life wasn't flashy, but it was full of the kind of peace that doesn't depend on other people remembering you exist. Until one evening last spring, when I got a text from a number I didn't recognize.
Y Patricia.
It's Ben. I listed you on a hospital form. Can I call? My stomach flipped. There wasn't a single emoji. Just those flat words.
No words.
No context. But buried beneath them, a flicker of fear. Something had gone wrong. I said yes. The call came 5 minutes later. He was breathing weird, half shallow, half forced. I had a seizure, he said. They think it's neurological. My mom's phone is off. Dad, he blocked me last year. I didn't know who else to call. I wanted to scream. Not because he'd finally remembered I existed, but because this was how. Not a coffee meetup. Not a question about his dog.
No.
He waited until now, at 28, with a medical emergency, and no one left. Still, I grabbed my coat. The hospital was 20 minutes away, but my mind time-traveled the entire drive. This was the same kid who once accused me of trying too hard when I brought him soup during finals. The same one who left me off his wedding guest list 3 years ago and pretended it was an email glitch. And now I was his emergency contact. But the weird part didn't hit until I checked in at the front desk. The nurse handed me a clipboard with visitor forms. On top was a printed patient intake sheet. I wasn't supposed to see it, but my name, Patricia Landon, was typed next to primary family contact. And below it, a second name had been scratched out in pen. Illegible. Scribbled away, hard.
Why?
I stayed the night in the hospital chair. He was groggy, medicated, and avoiding eye contact. I didn't ask questions. I just sat. In the morning, a young neurologist came in, all polite and efficient. We'll need to run an MRI, he said. And we'll also need someone to confirm some insurance inconsistencies. He glanced at me. Are you still the primary point of contact? I nodded. Ben didn't. But when the doctor left, Ben looked at me and said something strange. Don't sign anything.
Not yet.
Not even if they pressure you. That's when the first chill crawled up my spine. Why not? I asked. He looked down at his hands. It's complicated. That's when I knew this wasn't just a medical emergency. Something else was buried in all of this. Something that made him suddenly need me, not just emotionally, but logistically, legally, practically. But it was the little things that started to unnerve me. When I got home the next day, my smart thermostat had been reset to a different schedule. All my lights were dimmer. I hadn't changed anything. I checked the app. The log said, manual change, 2:14 a.m. I'd been at the hospital at 2:14 a.m. And my husband, Ben's father, had been out of town. Only one other person had the passcode to the account. Someone who'd helped set it up back in 2018.
Ben. But why?
The following week, Ben was discharged but still distant. He wouldn't say what was really going on, just that he needed space and appreciated the help. He Venmo'd me $75 with the memo line, gas plus snacks plus thanks. It felt like hush money. And then I noticed something else. I'd recently installed a budget app to track my side hustle earnings. The app connects to my email to flag digital receipts. But suddenly, I was getting alerts for Amazon orders I never placed. 3 to be exact. Shipped to an address I didn't recognize, but paid with a card that had my name. Not the number I use. A backup card I never activated, but was issued when my bank merged with another. I dug up an old envelope in my desk drawer. The card was still there. Unopened. Unactivated. But the transactions had gone through. That night, I texted Ben. No response. The next morning, I emailed the fraud department. But by then, the charges had disappeared from the tracking history, like they were never there. And the budget app? Somehow, the connected email was gone from the settings. That's when I stopped sleeping soundly. I started watching everything. Checking logs. Reading timestamps. Watching for patterns. And I saw one. Every time I visited Ben at his new apartment, a temporary rental his mom's cousin had apparently helped him get, my phone would get a small location ping and a second one, too, in a completely different neighborhood, as if my phone was in two places at once, as if someone had cloned it. Or worse, someone was logged into my Google account and triggering dual location signals. I changed my passwords. Every one of them. Ben never said a word about it. But he did send another text a few days later. Did you ever find that missing tax form from 2020? I hadn't told him I lost that form. In fact, I didn't even know it was missing until he said that. It's strange how quiet people remember the most. Like how long your login stays active after you forget to log out. Or how your Wi-Fi router keeps track of devices, even if you pretend you were never there. I didn't answer Ben's text about the tax form. Instead, I went looking. I dug through the plastic bin of old documents in the attic, where I kept everything from warranty receipts to expired pet licenses. The 2020 tax folder was there. The envelope inside was empty.
Gone.
I wouldn't have noticed if he hadn't said anything. And that was the first time I said it out loud to myself. He's watching me somehow. Not in the horror movie sense. Not through a window with binoculars. It was subtler. Like how ads started showing up for things I'd only thought about. How my Ring notifications would randomly say motion at front door. But when I checked the footage, the clips were corrupted or missing. And this was new. Sometimes the video would freeze on a frame, just long enough to catch a blurry figure at the edge of the screen. Like someone standing still, just outside the camera's reach. I didn't tell my husband, Jim. He'd always had a soft spot for Ben, even when Ben treated me like I was just another piece of furniture in his life. But Jim had been working late more often, and when I casually mentioned something felt off at home, he just nodded and said, "It's probably your hormones again." Again. Like being uneasy in your own home was just another hot flash. So I kept quiet. Instead, I reset every password I had. Then I pulled out the Wi-Fi router manual. I'd never looked at it before. But on page 9 there it was a way to see all devices currently and recently connected. I logged into the admin panel. There were 5 devices. 2 phones. A laptop. A tablet. And something labeled Ben's MacBook Pro. The last login? 3 nights ago.
1:42 a.m.
He hadn't been in the house in weeks. I took a screenshot, printed it, and slid it into a book on my nightstand. I didn't even know why I hid it. Maybe I was scared of feeling paranoid. Or worse, scared of being right. But I needed clarity. So I did something petty. I created a new Gmail account under a fake name. A woman named Tina Delano, complete with a Facebook profile and 2 Pinterest boards. Then I joined a private caregiving group that Ben's wife, Melissa, had once invited me to years ago when her mom had cancer. She'd long since left the group, but it still existed. I searched her name. Nothing recent. But her old posts were there. And in one of them, she had uploaded a screenshot from an insurance portal. The comment said, "Can someone help me decode this deductible stuff?" My eyes weren't on the insurance numbers. They were on the user ID at the top right corner. It matched the exact ID on the hospital documents from Ben's recent visit, the one I'd caught a glimpse of before he snatched it away. Same account. Same login. But Melissa had died in a car accident 11 months ago. And her portal was still being used. By who? I drove to the hospital the next day and asked for the attending neurologist. He wasn't available. But a resident pulled me aside in the hallway and asked, "Are you the one managing Ben Landon's case file?" I hesitated.
Why?
Because there's been a flag. His insurance was submitted under a deceased secondary holder. They're reviewing for fraud. My mouth went dry. The resident looked uncomfortable. We can't legally accuse anyone yet, but the hospital will likely file a report if the records aren't corrected. That night, I finally confronted Ben. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just asked, whose idea was it to list me as the emergency contact? He blinked like he didn't expect me to ask that. Then he said something so cold, it nearly knocked the wind out of me. Yours was the only name that wouldn't raise questions. After that, I stopped playing polite. I called the bank, asked them to send me a breakdown of every credit line tied to my social security number. It took 3 days. When the envelope came, I opened it at the kitchen table with trembling hands. There were 2 credit cards I recognized, and one I didn't. It had a limit of $6,000. Opened 2 years ago, with my name, at an address I'd never lived at, but I had visited once. For a Christmas party. Ben's old apartment. I froze. Then I called the credit bureau. They asked me to verify details. I answered what I could. But what made me want to scream was how neatly everything lined up. He hadn't just used my identity. He'd built a shadow version of me. One that existed on paper, but not in real life. One that only came alive when he needed something. Insurance. Credit. Sympathy. Silence. I was the ghost in his system. And maybe that's why the cameras kept glitching. Maybe that's why my budget app kept losing receipts. Maybe someone wasn't deleting files. Maybe they were just replacing them with rewritten versions. Versions that made me look forgetful, messy, old, unreliable, like a woman who couldn't be trusted with her own information. That night, I opened my laptop, logged into my own Google account, and opened the devices section. There it was. Signed in from unknown location. 3 days ago. The IP address pinged somewhere near his new rental. I clicked sign out of all devices. Then changed the password. But as I did, a chat window popped up in the lower right corner of the browser. No name. Just gray text. Took you long enough. I always thought digital betrayal would look like a hacked account or a stolen photo. I never imagined it would feel like someone wearing your identity like a second skin, answering emails you never saw, reading texts you never sent, and slowly making you doubt your own memory. I didn't respond to the chat message. I closed the window, unplugged the router, shut off the laptop. Then just sat, listening, not to the creak of the house, not to footsteps or wind, to the silence. Because in that moment, the quiet wasn't comforting. It felt rigged, like someone had muted the world around me so they could listen better. I wanted to believe it wasn't him, that Ben wasn't capable of something this calculating. But the signs were stacking up. And I hadn't even told you about the envelope yet. It showed up 2 days after the chat window incident. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in a familiar, half-slanted script I couldn't quite place at first. Inside was a single printed document. A forged power of attorney form. It was dated back 6 months. It listed my name as the grantor, Ben's as the agent. The signature at the bottom looked almost perfect. Except it wasn't mine. I'd never signed that form. I'd never seen it before. But it had my full name, my handwriting, even a fake notary stamp. And here's what made my skin crawl. The fake signature wasn't copied from a document. It was copied from an old birthday card I'd written to Ben's wife, Melissa, before she passed. I remembered it clearly. I'd signed it with love as a surprise, back when I was still trying to be the kind of stepmom Hallmark makes movies about. He'd saved that card, scanned it, and used it to become me. I contacted a lawyer. Quietly. Just an initial consultation. She told me to request a full credit freeze, place alerts with the 3 major bureaus, and notify any institutions where I suspected unauthorized access. Then she asked, "Do you want to press charges?" I didn't know how to answer that. How do you report someone you've tried your whole adult life to love? How do you press charges against someone who once curled up on your couch with a bowl of popcorn and told you you were not that bad for a stepmom? Instead, I asked something else. What if this goes deeper than just identity theft?
She paused.
What do you mean? That's when I told her about the hospital account, the lingering logins, the Ring camera footage that went missing, the messages, the ghost devices on my network. The lawyer didn't call me paranoid. Instead, she leaned in and said, "You need to get your medical file." That stopped me. My medical file? If someone has access to your insurance, they may have requested your medical records. That night, I followed her advice. I logged into the health portal I hadn't touched in over a year. The password had already been changed. It took me 3 rounds of resetting and security questions just to get back in. When I finally did, my heart dropped. There was a new appointment logged 2 months ago. Telehealth. Video call. Except I hadn't had any appointments. I clicked the recording.
It wasn't a video of me.
It was a video of someone pretending to be me. The call had been short. Less than 5 minutes. The woman on the screen kept her camera off. She'd claimed she was me, mentioned my birth date, and asked for a prescription refill for anxiety. The refill had been approved and mailed to an address I didn't recognize. I froze the screen and rewound it. There it was. The woman's voice. It was distorted, like someone using a filter. But she used one phrase that told me everything. "Could you just make a note in my file? Last time, it took forever to process, and Patricia Landon doesn't like waiting." Patricia Landon. She used my full name, then referred to me in third person. Like I was someone else entirely. Like I was the obstacle. I printed everything. Then I made 2 decisions. I filed a formal report for identity fraud with the FTC and flagged all my medical providers. I called Ben. He didn't answer. I tried again. Voicemail. So I left one message. "I know what you did. I have the documents. The recordings. The logs. If you don't want this to go legal, we need to talk." The next morning there was a note on my windshield.
No envelope.
Just a folded piece of printer paper, weighed down with a pebble. It read, "It's not what you think, but you won't like what it is either." And on the bottom corner, a symbol I hadn't seen in years. A lowercase m, inside a circle. Melissa's logo, from when she briefly ran a private Etsy store. Suddenly, everything shifted. This wasn't just Ben using me. This wasn't just identity theft. There was something of Melissa's still lingering in all of this. Or someone using her identity too.
But why?
She died in a confirmed accident. I went to the funeral. I saw the wreck photos. I heard the eulogy. So what did Ben mean when he said, "You won't like what it is either"? That night, I checked my email drafts folder. Not inbox.
Drafts.
And sitting there, unsent, was a message I had never written.
To Ben.
Subject line: "Forgive me." The body of the email was empty. But there was one attachment. A zip file titled, "Melissa, Final Logs, Zip." I stared at the file name for what felt like hours. Melissa, Final Logs.zip. Her name felt like a bruise I hadn't touched in months. I didn't remember saving this file. I didn't remember writing the draft. But it was under my account, my keyboard, my home. So either I was losing my mind, or someone was trying to rewrite it. I copied the zip file to a flash drive and opened it on an offline laptop, just in case. Inside, there were 7 documents. 3 labeled session transcripts. 2 labeled transaction reports. 1 titled property agreement, unsigned. And the last simply named, "Read me first." I opened that one first. It wasn't a letter. It was a stream of consciousness journal entry, written by Melissa, dated 2 weeks before her death. I thought if I played along it would stop. But it got worse. The phone calls, the camera pings, the messages from accounts I never created. I don't know who I'm married to anymore. I don't know if anyone believes me. But if anything happens to me, start with the email labeled Tether Protocol. He said it was just a backup system, but it felt more like a leash. I had to read it twice. Tether Protocol? I went back into the folder. That file wasn't there. I opened the session transcripts next. They were chat logs. Not emails. Not texts. They looked like backend data pulls from some private app. Something encrypted. Each line was time-stamped. Most were casual, grocery lists, money transfers, weird flirtations. But the third transcript chilled me. Ben, you really think she won't figure it out? Unknown. Not before it's too late. Besides, it's not fraud if the identity never gets used again. Ben, I can't keep faking the therapy records. She's starting to ask questions. Unknown. Then give her answers that keep her quiet. Ben, what about the car? Unknown. Already arranged.
The car.
Melissa had died in a single car crash. Skidded on a wet road. No drugs. No foul play. That's what we were told.
But now?
Now I saw something else. The transaction reports were logs of payments made from a joint account she shared with Ben.
Most were routine.
Until one stood out. $3,750. Paid to South Bay Autotech, Remote Diagnostics Division. 2 weeks before her accident. I looked up the business. It didn't exist. But the address linked to a storage unit. And the name of the person on the lease?
Ben Landon.
Suddenly, everything collapsed in on itself. Melissa hadn't just died. She'd been maneuvered. Gaslit. Cornered. Just like I'd been. Just like I still was. I called the lawyer. I gave her the files. Within 24 hours, she'd looped in a contact at a cybercrime task force. Someone who specialized in domestic digital manipulation, a quiet crime that lives in the shadows of shared bank accounts and mirrored logins. They took one look at the data and said something I'll never forget. He's not just stealing your identity. He's rehearsing for the next one. Over the next few days, the full picture unfolded. Ben had used Melissa's death to trigger an inheritance clause that granted him access to a trust her parents had set up, under one condition. He had to be the legal surviving spouse with no pending criminal charges. That meant everything had to look clean. She had to seem unstable. He had to seem blameless. And when cracks began to show in his version of the story, he began building a fallback identity.
Me.
The woman who was still legally tied to his father, who had health insurance, a decent credit score, and no one watching too closely. He hadn't just exploited Melissa. He had planned to phase me in, little by little, until my digital fingerprints matched the ones he needed next. I submitted everything to the police. The Ring camera logs, the router records, the forged POA, and that one message on my screen. Took you long enough. That IP address had been traced. It didn't lead to Ben's rental. It led to an old therapy office where Melissa once worked as a receptionist. A building Ben had quietly purchased through a shell LLC 6 months after her death. He'd been logging in from her ghost, using her accounts as a cover, letting the world believe Melissa had moved on before she died, alienated everyone, and spiraled into emotional chaos. He controlled the narrative and tried to replace her with me. 2 weeks later, Ben was taken in for questioning. Not arrested. Not yet. These kinds of crimes, identity fraud, medical manipulation, digital coercion, they move slow. They don't explode. They rot. And like all rot, they stink more the longer they're exposed to light. But I didn't need a courtroom to give me closure. Because the final piece of justice was quiet. A few months after the investigation began, I got a letter. Official-looking. Unopened. I let it sit on the table for days. When I finally opened it, it was a notice from the hospital. Ben had requested to remove me from his emergency contact list. Effective immediately. I smiled. Because that's what he always wanted, right? To erase me. But here's the thing about ghosts. We learn how to haunt the right way back. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever caught someone manipulating things behind the scenes, digitally or emotionally? And don't forget to subscribe. Silent strength always has the loudest echo.